From the very beginning of this video, I have to be abundantly clear because we do live in a generation where people just read headlines and move on and make assumptions that are incorrect because they don't watch the bulk. I encourage every magician of every kind, type, gender, race, creed to partake in the art of virginity. I don't think there should be any restriction on any magician that decides to partake in the art. I'm extraordinarily happy and glad when magicians of all different kinds join the art form and contribute to continue with what we do. With that being said, I think this article is slightly retarded. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I have to include some context. The New York Times recently released this article. The article in question is titled, "Being a Woman in Magic is the Hardest Trick of All." Now, I think it doesn't take much effort to look at a guy like me and the content that I've posted and know that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the New York Times. I think many times they post things that are, quite frankly, lies, baiting of all kind, and straight up rage porn, all specifically with the intent of making sure that you click. But I decided to look at the other previous articles by Lauren McCarthy, who's the author of this particular one, and it's around different things in the news, some Gaza stuff, not really anything of interest that's too crazy, more generic. However, this one I found stood out just because it happened to be about my field. Now, Lauren in the article goes on to interview 3 different magicians that are female and talk about their perspectives as magicians. There's no secret that the point of this article is to compound the hypothesis that women in magic have a harder time than men. She interviewed specifically Gabe Blackstone, who was the famous assistant to Harry Blackstone. And here she goes off to mention that around 8% of professional magicians are women, according to a spokesperson for the Magic Castle, private clubhouse in Los Angeles for members of the Academy of Magical Arts. Ms. Blackstone and others say a number of factors are to blame for the stubborn disparity, including sexism, wardrobe limitations, and the enduring stereotype that women best serve as the audience's distraction. Now, yes, historically, women tend to be the assistants when it comes to stage illusions. However, if you look at the effort that these assistants make behind the scenes when it comes to any stage illusion, it's unbelievable, and they deserve, in my opinion, more praise than the magicians that are performing themselves. The contortions, the staging, the planning, everything has to be precise. Now, I would say the reason that they stuck in this particular role when it comes to stage illusions is their physiognomy. They tend to be slim and slender than their male counterparts, and because of that, they could actually make the illusions happen. They also tend to use certain qualities that they possess over men for misdirection, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, it seems that the article is very sour on that particular fact. It goes on to mention that I think for many years no one really thought of the need for women to be the magician, Ms. Blackstone said, but now we're coming up with different roles and different things we want to be doing, and there's no reason why women can't be just as great as men. We'll get back to that point a little bit later. Take Nicole Cardozo, who often says she's the only female black magician I know. To understand the lack of diversity in magic, Ms. Cardozo said in an interview, we have to get into the role of who is allowed historically to be magical, supernatural. People are subconsciously less inclined to perceive women and people of color as magical, Ms. Cardozo said. Research on gender bias supports this assertion. A 2019 study published in a social psychological bulletin found that male magicians were judged to be more impressive than women, even when performing identical tricks. Now, I took a look at that study and read through it fairly carefully, and I noted a couple different things that could be alarming. Firstly, one of the reasons that the study claims that females have a harder time joining magic than men is specifically in the difficulty they have in joining magic organizations. Now, I make the argument wholeheartedly that the majority of magic organizations tend to be a little bit, well, honestly, retarded. Yes, there exists those select few that actually have some respect and care and attention and dedication and progress. However, the majority of them are taken by old men who want to hold on to their old ways. And your membership in a magic organization has absolutely nothing to do with your broader success in magic. The study itself proved its initial hypothesis that audience members found tricks performed by a male magician more impressive than a female magician. However, I found the study to be very generic when specifically making a mention as to what tricks were performed and what are the individual skill levels of the performers. The study never actually specifies what individual tricks are performed and only goes off to say that the same tricks were performed by the male and female magicians. And that's very critical, especially when it comes to a study that the main question they asked the participants was, how good was that trick? Now, personally, I think the term female magician is retarded. I've mentioned this many times in live streams. Every time I see it, I cringe a little bit because you're a magician. I'm not one of these people that goes off and lists an endless amount of genders. However, I do say that when it comes to magician, that word encompasses the whole broad spectrum of people that would be performing. However, recently there was a tiny bit of a micro movement against the term female magician as if it was some sort of gotcha. It seemed to me that magicians that were against the term female magicians were trying to make the point that it differentiates them from male magicians by saying that you're different, you're not the same, you might be inferior. Funnily enough, the majority of these magicians used the term female magicians in their advertising and on their websites because the term female magician works. Magic is an art form that tends to attract socially awkward men. Magic becomes that lubricant, that thing that allows you to now interact with people and have this thing that you could rely on. This thing that's interesting and novel and stands out. Magicians are already a niche of the population. So imagine a female that's interested in magic. You're going to be a niche of a niche. And again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes certain professions tend to lean in one way or another due to things like physiognomy. Things like you might just have a general attraction to that particular profession. For example, women don't tend to work in sanitation and take out the garbage, just the same that they don't tend to work in construction. They do tend to, however, work in things like nursing, which they overwhelm and dominate in a great way. So it's not a bad thing to say that there's less female magicians. It's just a fact. It's a statistic. It doesn't appeal to the majority of females. And that's not to say that it's a closed art to females. It's just that less females are interested in magic. It's a fact. I would even go as far as to arguing that women do better in magic now because it's novel, because there's less of them. And because of that, they stand out, which isn't a bad thing. Use what you got. In this case, you should use the PigCake Magic Academy, the home of over 1,500 videos going over card stuff, coin stuff, everything you need to become the best magician you could possibly be. All for the low price of a single White Claw a month. And I'm always adding content. So it's not just this list of massive amount of magic tutorials that you get access to, but it increases over time. The article goes on to say at 19, Gabriella Lester has been a touring magician for several years. She's a member of the Junior Society of the Academy of Magical Arts, which mentors gifted young magicians between the ages of 13 and 20. Of the 77 students in the program, she is one of just 10 women. Again, the article makes it seem like this is a negative. Miss Lester says she was definitely not the popular kid in school, where she could often be found trying to escape after having her classmates tie her to a chair with rope. The first time she wriggled out of a straitjacket at a school fundraiser while hanging upside down, she was 14. That is a fun story. I'm not taking away from it. However, that is 99% of magicians of all kinds. Most of the time, you have a difficulty in approaching people. Most of the time, you become known as the magician. So to imply that that's different because she's a female is just a moot point. Magic is built on keeping secrets, Miss Lester said, which is why it's difficult breaking in and learning. But for her, magic is not about fooling people. She wants to leave audiences feeling as though they have just been let in on a secret. That's what inspires people, she said. But with few women in the field to watch and emulate as she established herself as a performer, Miss Lester said that she was largely left to find her own way. The truth of the matter is that most magicians are left to find their own way. One of the most asinine concepts that I keep bugging on about is this idea of the mentor. Oh, you're self-taught? You didn't have a mentor? You didn't have somebody to teach you? Again, that's 99% of magicians that take up the art. They just watch videos, they try to copy, they read books, and they learn. The fact that there aren't a lot of female magicians that put out content is not because they're being held down by some weird magical force. It's because of the population size. It's already a niche of a niche of a niche for magicians that put out content for tutorials and put out content for people to learn from. So imagine that for female magicians, there's going to be way less content out there. And again, that's not to say that's anything of anyone putting them down. That's just population. But this article seems to keep pushing that narrative. Magic is magic. No need to overcomplicate it. Some advice at the end of the video. I always like giving advice at the end of these just to give you something. I've had to take care of my neighbor's dog for the past couple of days. I'm not a fan. I love dogs, but I hate pets. I hate the concept of you having to take care of something and pick up their poop and have to have it in a bag. I tend to have about 17 paper towels that I put between me and the poop, and then put that in a bag that I put in another bag. I know people that walk their dogs and they're just carrying around the poop like it's all good. There's feces in there. that harbors bacteria and attracts flies and things. You don't want to be just swinging this around. So it's less advice and more of judgment. I don't like you pet people. I don't like you dog moms or you doggy daddies. I'm not a fan of you. I do love dogs though. I love ducks. I love pigs, obviously. I love pigs. But I'm not going to have one as a pet.
I see you again, when 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 I see